Yeah, yeah. And those people in the front row really got to watch out when I do that, because I'm in the dark too. I'm in the dark most of the time, though. At least that's what I'm told. I I started out in this whole wood turning thing because I was wondering about how to turn a kite spool, where you could have the kite line on it and let go of it. It's kind of shaped like a fishing reel inside to allow the kite line just to run off of it. Well, I still haven't come up with the courage to try one yet, because I'm afraid that if I start making it, I'll end up back in kites and lose my interest in wood turning, I think. Because if I actually accomplish what my goal was to start at in wood turning, will there be anything left? And I know there will, but what will my motivation be? But so I started out doing that. Still haven't tried one yet. I'm learning about it, though. And I think that all these different techniques that you've seen in the wood turning clubs and through the symposium and the different areas like that are where you get this idea. Because I've got a lot of different methods that I've seen that I had never seen before. One of the things that still fascinates me is all the different ways that you can chuck wood. Not toss it in the wood pile, okay? The ways that you can actually hold it on a lathe to be turned. As opposed to, you don't have to have one of those nice fancy Stronghold chucks or Nova chuck or whatever. You can do it with a glue block. Because if everybody knows Dan Moreno up at the Northland, when he ran Turnabout Wood up there, he was awesome about glue blocks. He wanted to use glue blocks for just about everything. And that's just the way that he learned to turn, and that's what was the most comfortable to him. Now, he put his glue block in one of the fancy chucks, so he could take it on off the lathe easy, but that was how you started out doing this stuff. Well, what we're going to show tonight is part of the ball and cup toy, which I had some examples. We've all seen these, I think, right? Or everybody's played with one anyway. Or at least I would think most people here have played with one. I was trying to watch myself on the monitor and not catch it. Besides, this is left-handed, so I'm handicapped. There we go. So that's what we're going to try to make. I'm going to do it on a slightly larger scale. I don't want anybody to laugh at me because I've never made one on a large scale. I've only made little ones because most of the ones I make are for kids, not for adults. So I do want to talk a little bit. Yeah, the first try on that one, right-handed. I wasn't handicapped. That hand works. But I want to talk a little bit about the design of them. And we have a master sphere turner here in the room, Anthony. And because I've seen Anthony turn spheres, and I don't have anywhere near that kind of patience. But in turning these ball and cup toys, remember, you can see that this isn't a perfect sphere. It doesn't have to be. Okay, because one end of it is always going to land in that cup. Of course, I did this one backwards, so you can see the side that is ugly. So you want to be able to see the side that's pretty, right? As opposed to the side that doesn't look good. So that's one of the things you got to think about when you get ready to finish your piece. Now, there's also different shapes. This is about right. That's the right depth, about so, where about half the ball is showing. Maybe just a little bit less than half is showing. Now, you can see this one. I made this one in a slightly different way, that it's not as deep. So the cup doesn't fit inside, or the ball doesn't fit down inside the cup far enough. This is a lot more difficult toy to catch the ball in, because it tends to bounce. Because there's no rim to catch it, it tends to bounce back out. Well, this was a mistake, but I decided to design it as a feature. Like Microsoft, when they come out with something new, design it as a feature if it's a mistake. If it doesn't work right. Yeah, if it doesn't work right, it's a feature. Exactly, yeah. It just depends on how good your PR department is. But it's a feature, so what you do, and I thought, well, that's kind of a neat idea, but I'll make that an intermediate level ball and cup toy. We'll just call it something different. Still works, it just takes a little bit more practice. Then, and I had a neighbor, I think Tyler's about 7 or 8 years old, and I gave him one for Christmas a couple years ago. He thought, man, this is awesome, I love playing with this toy. But he started bragging in the neighborhood about how good he'd gotten with it. So I made him another one for this Christmas. I made the ball slightly larger than the cup, so he can't catch it. So it works both ways. You can do this however you want to do it. But here's another one of the attempts where the ball's just slightly too big. It does fit, and it does meet, and you can catch it okay, but it's just slightly too big. Now, these pieces, I'm going to go ahead and pass these around. They are, most of these are done out of red oak that I had glued up together, just because I didn't want to waste good wood for practice. And I'll just go ahead and start one on each row, and y'all can just kind of pass them around. And you can see what the basic shape is. Now, you can make the handle as exact or as detailed as you want. You can also make them really small. Okay? So if you want, I mean, of course, this one doesn't work very well because the string's just too short and too small. But I wanted to see if I could do it. I've been trying to make smaller stuff lately. You saw the little angel I showed off a little while ago. I'm not going to take Bob Davis's role at all because I know I'll never be able to do that. But you can make things as smaller or as large as you want because size doesn't matter. We all know this. So it's like Anthony's joke earlier to start the meeting, talking the difference between naked and naked. I spent some time in the South too. I kind of understand how that works. But what we're going to do is this since I normally start out with a small piece of wood. Oh, and this knuckle breaker. Every time I use this lathe, I tend to bust a knuckle just because I don't know exactly how all the levers turn on these Canadian things. A moment about safety. I want to ask, what does everybody else keep their safety goggles in? Mine are in the sock because they can't get scratched up that way. Yeah, it's actually a really neat little idea. And how many of us don't have that one sock that always escapes the dryer, right? That we can't find the other sock. You don't have that problem? Yeah, I guess you wouldn't, Anthony. But I want to talk just a moment about using different ways to mark centers, because I've been to a certain number of these meetings and everybody's already got their center mark already found. And I was up in the Northland Club the other day, and there was a gentleman who won one of these fine center finders. This is a fairly inexpensive model. You can get, I mean, I've found them anywhere from $1.99 to $5.99. But what it is, they won this in the raffle, and this guy came straight up to him and told him, "That thing doesn't work worth a darn. You shouldn't even consider trying to use it. Throw it away now." And I thought, now wait a minute, why would he say that? So I went up to the guy, that same guy, and he was still talking to the other fellow, and said, "Well, why do you think that didn't work?" He said, "Because I've never been able to mark center with it." And I asked him, "Well, are you aware that almost every piece of wood is not square?" Huh? This had never dawned on him that wood is not perfectly square when you buy it from the store, because he was always buying kiln-dried hard maple. And that was interesting. Thank you, Anthony. And anyway, because very few pieces of wood are actually square, you have to do it from all four. Oh, okay. You have to do it from all four corners to find center, to put it in, and then you mark your center. And when you actually mount it on the lathe, and I don't know, can we zoom in on this a little bit? Okay. And you can see that there's 4 lines here. They don't all perfectly match. Because if it was truly square, they would all be on top of one another. There would only be 2 lines, not 4. So that's one of those little pieces. And this is one of those newel posts that I bought from the club right over there. It's already got center marked on the other side. Should I trust it? I don't really have a reason to try to trust it. There is a point there. It'd be hard to start another one, but I might as well go ahead and mark it and see how good they did. This is true. I am going to cut most of it away. But just to be curious. That looks pretty darn close. Certainly close enough for where I work. For those of you who remember from the last time I presented, I worked for the U.S. federal government, your friendly federal government. So that's close enough for the way I do things. And everybody, I think Anthony has introduced the concept of the BFH, right? A big hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this. What? Am I giving you credit for something you didn't say? And I turned off my mic just because I didn't figure you all wanted to hear that or listen to that particularly. Yeah, I guarantee you wouldn't want to hear when that happened. And sorry, Anthony, I guess I'm giving you credit for way too much, apparently. And what I'm trying to do is just get this ready so that I can get it round. I'm just going to get it rounded down to where I can actually mount it between centers. Or no, I'm sorry, it's between centers now. I'm going to put it in a chuck. One toy out of this block. Well, for this demonstration purpose, I'm going to get one toy out of this block so that we can actually be able to see it a little bit easier. The small ones that I'm passing around, I actually make those out of only a 4-inch block or maybe a 5-inch block. I tend to get very nervous when I'm hollowing end grain and I have a big piece of wood hanging out here. So most of my ball and cup toys have really short handles. But it's just one of those things that I'm not that comfortable with doing yet, so someday I'll learn. Okay. Let's see if I can figure this out. I heard somebody say, turn it up till it shakes. I've never done that yet, and I'm not going to start now. I'm going to try to make Bill Coomer proud. He's the one that taught me how to do this. And I'm just roughing this down. Isn't it, though? He didn't have it sharp. Yeah. You want me to get my skew chisel out and do it, Frank? I thought about doing this as that magic of cooking shows where, oh, they turn around and all voila, there's something already turned out to round. But when you're roughing down, you want to be careful and go from one side to the other. And something I learned the really hard way is don't run off the tool rest while you're still cutting. That's not a fun experience. Don't learn that the hard way. Still fairly unround. When I'm roughing down, I hardly ever worry about what the cut really looks like. I'm approaching round now. But a roughing gouge is really misnamed. Because if you think about it, and if you get kind of careful about it, you can turn a really nice smooth, get a nice shaving out of a roughing gouge. So it just kind of depends on what you're working on, what you're trying to accomplish. Because I love how people give things a certain name, and that's the only thing they think that tool's good for. Well, I've used my roughing gouge to turn egg cups in the Egg Cup Challenge up north, to do all kinds of stuff like that, because, okay, just because it's called a roughing gouge doesn't mean it has to be used that way, and that's the only use for it. I'm going to stop cutting for a moment to talk about how the tool is coming in and making contact. When I'm running down or taking wood into square, from square to round, right, we're making brown and round. I've heard different theories about how you want to hold the tool. I tend to hold it at an angle just because I don't want the shavings to hit me in the nose. I'm a little bit vain, so I'll admit that. But if you hold it straight up and down, of course mine's not ground perfectly straight across, but it actually is supposed to be splitting the wood fibers. It's actually supposed to be splitting the wood fibers as it meets, right like that. you can see how it's meeting and it's going to catch here and here. So it's actually supposed to be cutting the fibers more cleanly that way. I'm going from square to round, so I've never found that that was really that important at this phase. That's just my own personal opinion, of course, and worth everything you just paid. Oh, sorry. Okay, just like that, where it's straight on. And I normally turn it like that, so the shavings fly away from my nose, just because I just don't have any particular need to have shavings inside my nostrils. Like I said, I'm kind of vain, so I tend to turn it just a little bit. And you can go either direction. This is also usually the phase when I'm doing some turning down stock. I always stop and check to make sure this is still tight, because unfortunately I've had that fly off a time or two. So you want to think about those kind of things too. Sure is nice when those shavings come off clean, isn't it? It's kind of a neat thing to see. Getting my 1/4-inch parting tool. Now, something I've learned through a bitter experience is when you're getting ready to make your tenon to put inside that chuck, do a tenon on both ends. Because then if for some reason you mess up on one or it decides to fly out of the chuck and it gets destroyed, you still have a tenon on that other end. So you can just flip it around and start from there. And I've actually made a cardboard cutout at home that I use to measure the size of my tenons. Something I'm trying to see here is how square that is, how close to 90 that is. Here we go. That's not too bad. Because that's what makes those chucks hold, is by how it fits onto these against this jaw. It holds obviously inside the jaws, but if this surface that you're going to match up to right there, you can kind of imagine how that's going to fit in there. If that right there isn't a good 90, if this is slightly, let's see, I guess that'd be leaned out, then it's going to lose it. It's not going to be able to hold on to it. So you got to be kind of thinking of that. And I always take 2 or 3 stabs at it just to see if I'm close. So I guess I shouldn't say the word stab at it when you're wood turning, right? That's probably not that correct. I'm sorry? Not with sharp things in your hand when you take a stab at it? You're just worried because you're sitting on the front row, Dean. And most of the time, if you ground your parting tool and kept the end fairly square, then when you come in and do that, it makes a really nice 90, as you can kind of look down on it and see there. So I think that's close enough. I think we're ready to put it in the chuck now. Okay, there we go. I would have been like Anthony calling dibs on the 16-inch jet over there, because that's what I have at home. All the way. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dean. And I picked a stronghold chuck off one of the other lathes because that's what I have at home, so that's what I'm comfortable with. How's that? That's not so bad? I was learning how to use it. I don't believe this key fits this chuck. That was the one that was setting with it. That works better. Okay. Still, you're right. It still doesn't sound like it's fitting just right. Oh, that's nice. King Anthony, once again, to the rescue. Now, and also while I'm looking down at this, I'm checking to see whether or not it's making a good 90. There's a spot where it's not making a good 90. So I'm going to loosen this up. Kind of wiggle that up against there nice and tight. And there, squeeze that down. I lost a little bit there, but I think that's close enough. I think that'll do the job. This is the point when you're making the ball and cup toy, and I always still bring the tailstock up, just because for safety. Just because you've got it in a chuck doesn't mean it's held securely yet. Okay, so now's when you need to think about your ball and cup toy as far as how you're going to lay it out and what the shape's going to look like. Obviously, you want the ball to be small enough to fit inside this piece. I go for my handy-dandy little cheap calipers. I kind of look at them and see what the size of that piece is. We know that size. I'm not worried about what the actual size is, just that that's the size of the outside diameter of this item. I haven't rounded things down after putting it in the chuck, because you know it never rounds and fits exactly the same, but I haven't made it fit that piece yet. So I know that I can't be this size, right? The ball can't be this big or it'll never fit in the cup. So I kind of look at it here. I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch off. And you can see where that's going to fit. That's still too big. And this is kind of just one of those things that you just kind of have to get a feel for. The end of your tenon out here is probably a pretty good place to start. That's kind of what I've used as my measuring stick. That tends to work fairly well. So that's about where we're going to start at. And that's the one I want to part down to and actually get that spot as the center of my ball that I'm going to use, that I'm going to make. I think we're going to put it back in round first. Okay, we've got it back down into round. Now, for those of you who haven't done this particular maneuver, if you have any sleeves, this is the time when you want to roll those sleeves back and not do that. And even though these sleeves are kind of Velcroed up, I still be real careful about where my fingers are at. Now, if I were really particular about where the center of this ball is going to be, I would start I would measure and do some math, but it doesn't matter that much because we're just going to try to make a sphere. So I think that looks like about where the center of the ball would be. So that might actually be a little small. I think I'll stop there. And then you can just kind of remove the wood on either side of it. Now that I've got that size I want. Remember, I've got to cut away the end here because of where that's fitting. I want to cut that off too. So. And I kind of tend to do like a stair-step pattern to make the shape of the ball, just so I can kind of get a feel for where it's going to be. That's not looking like such a hot ball right now, is it? Well, we'll see what we can do about it. Try to get some curve in it here. And I just grabbed my 3/8" spindle gouge here. Oh, this is looking ugly so far as the ball. This is going to be an easy ball and cup toy because it'd be very easy to catch the ball inside of it. I should have let Anthony turn the sphere. Yeah, this is looking really ugly, isn't it? Oh well. Remember, if the ball gets too small, you can always adjust the size of the cup and the handle. You can always bring that size down. Remember that. Yeah, this eventually, that really little one, that's where I started out with a piece like this. You know, it's kind of like the toothpick principle, right? How big a log do you need to make a toothpick? So, more of those government things. Well, I have to tell a great one I got on email today. It's a government joke that I've actually heard several times, and several presidential administrations, so this is not any particular impact on the ones that are in office right now. This little boy was desperately trying to save $100 to buy a bicycle. Anthony's already told a couple of bad jokes. I can do one too. And the little boy, he's doing everything he can to possibly save this money. And so he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And so he decides he would write God a letter and ask God to help him raise this $100. And the postmaster general in the little town thought that was really cute. So he took that letter of the young man's and sent it to the president. And the president looked at that and thought, wow, that's a fantastic idea, this little boy. Well, thinking that $5 would be an awful lot of money to send to the little boy, because the little boy probably didn't know what that was and have the value of money. The president told his secretary to put $5 in an envelope and mail it to the little boy. Well, the little boy got the letter, and he wrote another letter to God. He said, God, thank you for the $5. However, next time, don't send it through Washington, because those son of a guns kept 95% of that $100. Of course, it was a slightly different series of language that was used in that email, too. And I'm just doing a little bit of scraping here, trying to get a somewhat a round shape. Well, we can all tell by eyeball that my round is not very good. Blame it on the camera? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay. Blame it on... Merle's a great camera guy, so I'm not going to blame it on poor Merle. But I know Anthony has shown this when he's turned spheres before, where you actually lay an actual something round against it to see how close you are to round. And this, you can see that I'm nowhere close to actually making a sphere. And this is just an end-to-end coupler you can buy at the hardware store. I mean, one of those high-tech devices that works really well. So, and you can see that I'm nowhere close to achieving round. But hey, we're just trying to make a ball and cup toy. So we'll take a little bit more cuts off of it. But remember, this is one of those things that it's never going to be actually rolled on the ground, because it's going to be on a string. Unless, of course, you have one of those kids like I was when I was growing up that said, well, what would happen if I took it off the string? Then, of course, you had to get a new string. And I learned why the back pocket was sometimes uncomfortable. I'm going to stop there because we all know about sphere making, I think, or a little bit. Now, I have an 80 grit gouge with me that I brought with me. Everybody familiar with an 80 grit gouge? I have several in my toolbox back home. And you also, put your sandpaper grits together with one of these fine binder clips. They give those away at the office. Can you believe that? I do work in a government office, yes. It's like the photocopier subsidy. Has anyone here ever operated the photocopy subsidy? Where you take copies from your employer because you feel you're entitled to them? That's a photocopy subsidy. You have to pay income tax on the photocopy subsidy? I suppose somebody does, but I never have. Yeah. Don't mention it. Somebody will raise your taxes for it. You're right. Oh, and never remove the tool rest while the lathe is running. I'm going to make just a little bit of a dimple on this side so that way because I'm going to drill a hole all the way through that ball so that I can run the string through. When I pass that around, everybody had a chance to see the string went all the way through. Then you're going to do a recessed hole to hide it, to hide the knot. So I will once again prepare and use my fine different weight of sandpaper gouges. Actually, that little detail on the end doesn't look too bad. Has anybody here actually turned on their lathe to just practice turning something? To just try to make a bead? To just try to make a cove? I have too, but I always end up with a project at the end. Because it really bothers me just to practice and tear wood away. So I always come up with something that I can practice making 3 or 4 of something. Like I started out with a piece of wood this size to make a letter opener, so I can practice my coves or my beads or whatever like that, just so that I can give that a try and see what I get. Because I have this problem with What? You tried to practice them with a skew? Tell us all about it, Frank. It didn't work. I told you where my skew was, didn't I? It's holding up my tomato plants in my garden. Works real well for that. But no, I actually am trying to learn how to use a skew. Merle, I got a great skew story for you I'll tell about while I finish this up. I was at the woodworking show there working in the Northland booth, and there was a young man came up to me and said, I've been trying to use a skew for a really long time. He said, I'm bound and determined to figure out how to use it. And I said, well, that's a very admirable thing. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how to use mine too. And he asked me, what causes a catch? I said, well, I don't know, but I haven't figured out whether the cursing comes before or after. I'm still trying to figure that out. And so I'm there, and this guy's asking me about all this, and, well, I hadn't done all that much with it, so what did I know? And he asked me if I could try to show him one, and we could try to figure it out. So I said, sure, no problem. So I grabbed my handy-dandy skew chisel and try to make a catch. I tried for probably 10 minutes. I couldn't make that skew chisel catch while I was trying to do it. I said, well, let me just try a regular cut, and boom, there it went. So I got a catch. But when I was trying to make a catch, I couldn't do it. So that, of course, taught me a nice lesson that when you want something, rarely will you get it. But the skew chisels are fickle beasts, and I knew that to begin with. So I would imagine an 80 grit skew, that would be kind of difficult to use. Almost put the wrong size drill bit in. Because you want to make your small hole, right? Same like with the lathe. You can always make a large piece smaller. You can't make a small piece bigger. So, and I'm just going to drill right through that ball. It's a theory at this point. What? It's a law? Okay. First law of wood turning. Okay, I'll buy that. And don't worry about that. That's one of those fine, cheap bits from Harbor Freight. Oh, and it came loose. The drill chuck came loose on me. I bet it still made the hole in through there. Now, normally, I would go ahead and make that cut and go ahead and make that other drill in there. But that's when you kind of have to decide which end's going to show up. Have the samples made it all the way around? Could I have one of those back? Oh, they're already back up here? Oh, okay, great. This is a good example one. This is one where I went ahead and put the actual dimple on the end as opposed to actually using a drill bit to do it. I just kind of put a nice dimple there to fit. And remember, this is the side that's going to look good when you put it on here, but when it lands in that cup, it's always going to land like that. Okay, it's always going to land like this, where the string is out. So that's the side that you're going to see. Well, which one would you rather have? The one that's all nice and sanded and rounded over to where the string comes through. That's one of these learning things that you figure out after doing enough of them. So let's go ahead and we'll just go ahead and finish this off and part it down. And it's got a little bit of tool mark there, but I'm not too worried about it. It's like I'm kind of watching the time here. And when you do a parting cut, you always want to do it to where you give yourself more room so that you can do a part and then bring that down. Because otherwise that tool's going to get really, really hot. That's kind of uncomfortable. I'm going to round this edge off just a little bit. I need to get myself some more room so I can cut in there on the back. Did anybody in the KC club get the question at the woodworking show, where do you get your wood? Did anybody get that question this year? I got that question from a few people. And I really tried to be polite and answer it, that it's firewood or I get it from a lumber yard, but I'm too fast. I told them, well, that comes from trees. Because isn't that where our wood comes from, trees? So, I didn't hear it. No, I didn't hear that. It's probably best that I didn't hear it. Okay. A typical government answer. No, a typical government answer is it depends. No, the typical government answer, it depends. And that's a terrible sphere. I'm going to call my mentor, Frank Novich, up to finish it off for me so it's round. Yeah, I want to see it with a skew chisel. Oh, yeah. If I want to see it, I want to see it done right, Frank. Oh, yeah. Have to start all over? Yeah, you're probably right. But it's a demo, so I'm going to try to do it. Does everybody have an Arkansas parting tool in their bag? Anybody from Arkansas? Any Arkansasians? Oh, okay, you're not going to admit it if you are. This is an Arkansas parting tool. Looks a lot like a hacksaw. Works a lot like a hacksaw, too. You can do this with a lathe running, but I've never had great success that way. But, I got the ball is made. Now, the back looks awful, but I'm not worried about that. That's okay. Right now, anyway. Because for this demo, you understand how much further I would take that to get that down to round. Some people actually cheat and buy these in a bag at Woodcraft, I understand. I like to turn on the lathe, so I'm never going to cheat and buy one at Woodcraft. How about using a golf ball? That's a really good idea. Never done that. Last time I tried to drill a golf ball, I found a golf ball that I actually swiped from a driving range. It had a liquid core, therefore I got sprayed with all kinds of nasty gunk. So I don't cut golf balls up anymore. So now we get to go to the fun part, right? We're actually going to get in there and actually make a end grain turning. Yes? Hey, there you go. Turn the dimples off. Are you trying to hide, Rick? I think that's not too bad of an idea, truth be told. Really? Well, I know a lot of guys who carve golf balls. You ever carved a golf ball, Larry? Larry's an awesome carver, so I always ask Larry all carving questions because I figure he knows or has done it all. I've been told by different people about how to turn, actually how to cut into end grain. I like to use a 3/8 inch bowl gouge with kind of a traditional grind on it. That just tends to work really well, at least for me. I've had a lot of people tell me that you need to use sharp scrapers and actually use a scraper to turn out end grain, to hollow end grain. I've done that. I'm not as comfortable as I am with a cutting tool as opposed to a scraper. Maybe someday I'll actually be comfortable and use that. But right now, at this point, I'm not that comfortable with it. So, yeah, I'm going to have to just take it off. This is... I remember, I saw the newsletter, Anthony, and I read that too. I actually read the newsletter that Rick's secretary puts together. So I'm just going to hollow the end grain out here. Get rid of this little nubbin on the end first. I am actually trying to learn how to turn using my body, rather than moving my arms, because I've been told I have bursitis, tennis elbow. And I don't play tennis, nor have I ever had any urge to play tennis. Therefore, it's got to be from wood turning. So, and for those of you new turners, this front forward hand, the forward hand's entire job is to hold that tool down on the tool rest. That's its job. Now, you'll notice turners who are also controlling the tool that way, and that's okay. But that's where I think my elbow issues come into play. But I'm trying to learn how to use this hand back here while I hold it against myself. Has the ball made it all the way around yet? Because it's time to do some measuring. Yeah, please. Nice. Dick is now our official softball guy. I think Dick could do the softball toss. Slow pitch, yeah. Boom. An extra oil? Thought it was a horse. I once told one of my coworkers that people can move amazingly fast when something's flying at their head. And I asked him if he had made a rather unkind insult toward me, and I asked him because I wanted to find out how fast he could really move. So I told him I had a notebook in my hand that was a 3-inch notebook full of paper, and I don't think he could move that fast. He found that unkind. And on this, you can kind of just imagine you're making a small bowl. Right? Anybody here turned end grain bowls? Or goblet, right? That's a little bit more than half of that ball disappearing in there, right, to catch it. Well, I want to go just a little bit more because that's such a poorly shaped sphere. I think it's going to be willing to bounce out. Plus, I have really nasty tool marks in there. So I'm going to try to make some cuts to get rid of those. And by the time I get rid of those, that should clean this out to the point that I'm happy with it. So I'm going to take really light cuts. Oh, that felt pretty. Let's see if it looks that good or not. Well, it's not too bad. A little bit rough around the top edge, but we'll do a little bit more. Because you can sand down in there different ways. I tend, for this open end, I tend to just kind of use my fingers to sand. No, Dick, I don't use sandpaper. Feels pretty good. I'm satisfied with that. Time to find my sandpaper. Can you have the ball back? Sure. And believe it or not, I actually have improved in my turning, that I don't have to start with 80 grit all the time. Depends on how fast I go. If I'm trying to turn something really fast, then I tend to do a lot more sanding than cutting. I've also found it's remarkably important to have sharp tools, because I've been accused for a lot of years of not being the sharpest tool in the box. And it's amazing how much better a turner you look when you actually have sharp tools. Am I the sharpest? No, I'm still not the sharpest tool in the box. However, I have graduated from the dumb as a box of rocks category. So I am moving up, but ever so slightly and slowly. That feels pretty good. Let's take a look at that. One tool mark up around the edge. I don't think that's too bad. Normally I would get my scraper out at this point and go right to the grinder so it comes up with a real nice burr on it so that I actually can cut it off. But it's also at times like this, I mean, you know, you saw me kept checking that to make sure that's going to fit in there just right. Well, that's going to fit real well. So I'm real happy with that as far as how deep that is. You can always go a little bit deeper with making this, but when it gets more and more shallow, it's a lot harder to catch that ball for whoever's going to be doing the tossing or the playing with it. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Yeah, especially Dick, yeah. I may have to give this to Dick just because I think he needs a toy. I didn't hear what was said. I think it's probably best. And I just rounded that edge over a little bit just so that's a little cleaner. Now this obviously is hard maple from those newel posts that we use over there. And and it works really nice. Some things I've learned on this, you don't want to use soft woods like poplar. I tried to make one just to practice out of poplar to see what would happen. And well, that worked great. I mean, it's a really nice wood to turn. It's real soft. You can use skew chisels on it. It's forgiving. But as a ball and cup toy, it's worthless. Because that ball, as it hits the rim of that cup, is going to chip that cup rim off. So you want to think about how thick you want to leave that. So the hard maple is not really going to matter that much. You can get it fairly thin, and that ball will hit it all day long and not hurt it. But also the ball will get dented. If you actually use poplar, the ball would end up getting dented to where you start losing that. So anyway, so we just kind of get in here and start cutting some more. And here's where the roughing gouge comes back out. And I'm just going to remove a lot of wood. Don't you love watching those shavings come off? I got a little aggressive, didn't it, on that one? Oh, there was a skew chisel catch to be proud of. You know, Bill, you told me that would happen to me someday. It finally did. And, of course, for all to see, too. Yeah, in front of people, of course. Hey, that looks kind of like one of those barbell things you hold on to, doesn't it? Well, now we're ready to start thinking about the shape of the goblet, or the cup. Anthony got me really excited about the goblet turning contest today. And on this, you're trying to go for a good cut and a good curve. Now, on a ball and cup toy, is it as essential that, like with a goblet, it follows a nice curve and shape? Well, you want your pieces to look good, so you want to think about the curve and shape. However, I kind of like goblets, or not goblets, but these ball and cup toys, to look a little bit like a torch, like a, like the Olympic torch or something you're holding in your hand. Just because I think it adds a nice, kind of a nice decoration and shape to it, or around that edge over a little more. And I forgot my wire burners at home, so I can't put any gewgaws on it. Now, I actually do have a depth gauge here to actually check to see how deep it is and make sure I don't go too far from that. So I mark that off and then measure from the top. And yeah, I'm doing fine. I've got a nice solid size here, plenty of room to play with. I'm getting a nice pattern there because it's vibrating a little bit as I'm taking my cuts. So I'd have to cut those out and work those away from it. Some of it's getting out of there. You can always turn the tool around and kind of make a nice little scraping cut as you go here. And if you really want to hide your mistakes, you get a chatter tool out and actually get in there and put some chatter tool marks on it to hide where your mistakes are to make them go away. I'm not going to show that tonight. Or does everybody want to see a chatter tool at work? Everybody seen a chatter tool or used a chatter tool? I'm seeing heads nod. Yes. You want to see it or no, you don't? Show us. Okay. I'll cut some more away so we can see the chatter tool at work. I'm just going to remove some wood here. I found the chatter tool works a lot better. Because you kind of need to raise your tool rest. Because the chatter tool works a lot like a scraper. You kind of do a little bit of measuring and find out where it fits and sits. Because you want to allow this part right up here, the actual thin ribbon of steel, to be able to bounce. That's the idea of the chatter. It's going to bounce. And if you hold it right and make it happen, it's going to scream. And I may turn the mic off before I try to do this. It would work well on the inside of the cup? Yeah, you're right. That would look really good. I've had lots of people tell me you want to chatter right down in this, let's see, I guess that'd be the Yeah, between the 7 and 430, somewhere right in there, to chatter right along this bottom edge and kind of drag the chatter tool out. I've had different luck from different places on the piece. Yeah, that's pretty thin. That's pretty fine chatter. We need to make that more deep. I tried, Donna. Yeah, there's a little bit of chatter coming out on it. You can almost see it. It's not bouncing very well for me tonight for some unknown reason. You want to be careful when you're doing your chatter work that when you go grab your sandpaper, you don't start with such a color on it. Because that color will really make that chatter stand out. Or it should. Yeah, there you can kind of start. You can see the chatter coming out of it now. See where it started to do that angle. Besides, that marker smells really good up here. So go ahead and do this toy anyway. I suppose it's so you can do more of those chili pepper heart cutouts like you did. That just takes too long. And you may have noticed the captive ring goblet I made over there. I think that a goblet or a handle shape should be in proportion to whatever the piece is. I really like seeing the really thin-stemmed goblets. That's really impressive to me. But unless the goblet itself is turned to be really fragile and really thin, I don't think they look good together. So that's why I stopped and made that goblet with the stem as thick as it is. Because I wasn't trying to make a thin, fine goblet. I was just trying to make one that looked pretty decent. Now, I'm going to actually do a little cove right down here on this part. And you'll be able to see why in just a minute. Now, at this point, I would actually get my skew chisel out and give it a try. But we're doing a demonstration. I don't want to look bad. Because the planing cut's the only cut I can really do well with the skew chisel. But I think we can go ahead and sand from there and just be happy with that. Yes, I have a drill press at home, but this is just more fun because I get to use my lathe. Isn't it? Oh well. Drill out a little bit there for the knot. Now we get to play with fire. That's when you find out how good your hole was drilled. It's not wanting to run through there. So that means you could use a needle. I'm just going to use this drill bit. Hold it right at the bottom of the cup and go around your hand once and twice to where that ball will land back inside there. That is the best figure I can give you for how long that needs to be. Because for some unknown reason, it seems to be about the right length to catch the ball in the cup. I can't explain it much better than that. So, there you go. Ball and cup toy. Thank you, Rick.